Hi, it is Monday, April the 10th, 2023. So, uh, I know I haven't been on here much recently. Um, I don't remember exactly which videos I've even still got up. I know at times I've deleted a bunch, and I get there's a lot that I don't really want to have put out there, and there's probably stuff I probably should just delete all my videos, but I haven't done it yet. Maybe at some point I'll have time to go through them all and sort of decide which ones I want to keep up there. But, if I said something that wasn't ideal, it is what it is, and I can forgive myself. This world is continuing to deteriorate. The economic situation's continuing to worsen. I don't know if people still well, it appears that people still don't understand that the dollar is going to collapse. We've been, when I say we, libertarians for the most part, have been calling for this for a long time, and we said inflation was going to increase. Inflation finally has, and yet still no one really gives us any credibility, which is really crazy to me. Whenever I engage with people who disagree with me on Twitter, it seems like pretty soon it just they go to their insults. The two things they really love to insult are my intelligence and my physical appearance. As if somehow, I guess, these are reasonable responses to someone presenting ideas that are contrary to the ones that you believe in. But to me, it shows a lot of insecurity. It shows a lot of cruelty. It shows a lot of closed mindedness. It shows a lot of negative things about the people who are launching these insults. And typically, that's the point that I add you to my block list. There's been some other things that have gotten people put on the block list. At this point, pretty much anyone who's advocating for gun control is getting blocked. I'm just simply not interested in hearing um, about how you think that guns are creating all these problems. Because the truth is, if someone wants to kill a bunch of kids, it's really not going to be that hard to do. I bet I could do it with my bare fucking hands. You put me in a classroom full of kids, if I really wanted to. Of course, I wouldn't want to, nor would any rational, compassionate human being. But, there's this big cry for gun control. And in my opinion, a lot of this is orchestrated by the media and by the government, who they want the people to be disarmed because they understand that the dollar's on its last legs, and they understand what happens when populations become unable to feed themselves. What happens are things like the French Revolution, where the people that they population blames end up having real bad things happen to them as the population revolts. And I think a lot of people in politics, I think the bankers, the central bankers, the politicians, I think some of the maybe CEOs of the big corporations, these are the types of people most likely to be targeted and blamed by the population when they become unable to feed themselves. So, from the perspective of the government, from the perspective of the politicians, and the media channels that are really one and the same with them, it makes sense to try to advocate and perhaps even to stage uh, events where a mass shooting occurs, to try to bring on the cries for more gun control. But The fact remains that the Second Amendment does exist and that guns are prolific in the society we live in. And that's not changing. A lot of people won't be surrendering their arms. And even if there are laws put in place, there are so many ghost guns and um, unregistered guns and black market opportunities to buy guns. And there will be so many more if and when they become outlawed that they're just going to be a reality of living in this world. So I'm really not interested in hearing people whine and complain and attack me personally. Um, Try to claim that I don't care about kids. I mean, I just took my two kids on a vacation to Las Vegas, where I sat by while they went on all the rides at Circus Circus. I could have been doing something more interesting, more fun, but I decided, I'm going to devote my time and my care and my attention to my kids to try to give them a good experience because I care about them. So to say I don't care about kids is just so completely fallacious and ridiculous that I'm just really not interested in interacting with someone who's going to assign me that kind of hatred or cruelty. It's entirely inaccurate and it indicates, again, their own insecurities with their own arguments. You know, you want to know why people support the right to bear arms? There are plenty of resources you can look at, including my own Twitter feed and countless other resources where people can explain exactly from a historical perspective, from a practical perspective, why they want to own guns. If you want to hear it from me, at this time, I think the main reason that I think people should own them is because people are going to run out of food and people are going to get desperate, and desperate people do what they have to do to try to acquire food. Um, and people need to be prepared to protect what they own if they don't also want to starve. You know, I support a transition to a free society. I support a complete transfer of government services to the private sector and a liquidation of government assets. I describe this in my book and I go into great detail. I go market by market and discuss how this can be accomplished in a somewhat orderly manner, with many considerations given the world that exists as it exists. So, I'm offering a solution that will prevent ultimately a whole bunch of violence if implemented because it can actually give people hope when they have none. Uh, so again, to say that I lack compassion or that I don't care is just completely outrageous, is completely false, and just indicates that you, the accuser, lack empathy, that you haven't listened to me, that you don't understand me, you don't understand my reasoning, and that you aren't interested in gaining that understanding, but only as labeling me in a negative way and then attacking me on a personal level. Um, so those are some people I block. Other people I block are people who support socialism. You know, I my original book was called Human Discourse because I had this great flash of insight that I should be listening in conversations and I should be understanding why people believe things that are different to me. And I did that. I did that extensively back in the days I was on Facebook, which I'm sure all that's been deleted now, but I was a participant in a huge anarchy forum where it was probably 75 or 80% left anarchists and about 20% ANCAPs or some version of right anarchists. And I listened to their arguments. That some of those arguments were valid. I advanced my understanding. I stopped doing what a lot of ANCAPs do, which is refer to a moral basis of natural law. And I recognize the reality that different people simply have different ideas of what is moral, and that it is, as far as I can see, impossible to change someone's feelings on that matter. And that what the deciding factor is force. And that's just the way it is. That's the law of the jungle, and it's a reality that needs to be accepted. And so, given that reality, I said to myself, well, how can we have capitalism? How can we have free economic markets given that reality? And I stopped referring to myself as an anarchist, because the leftists described anarchy as a lack of hierarchy based on the root of the word, and that made sense to me. They said, land ownership and government are essentially the same thing, and I conceded that that makes sense, and I advanced my ideas to my current position. But there were only so many arguments that I encountered before I stopped encountering new arguments and started encountering only hatred and only insults and no true discourse, no true back and forth, no one who was really interested in learning and advancing their understanding. And so what I did was I had one last big back and forth with I think it was a group of Marxists that were kind of represented by this one person. I think he probably had some kind of chat window or other people that were kind of in his ear or by his computer. I think it was a group, but there was one guy basically that I was having this discourse with. I posted it on my website. On my it was the second discussion I posted on there. The first one was a law of attraction discussion, which I can get into that in a minute, but this discussion with this socialist, I felt like I really covered from front to back, what I believe in, why I believe it works, and why it will work, and the issues I had with socialism, and again, I felt like I ended up getting personally attacked, and I just said, you know what? I'm not going to go down this road. Every time I have these conversations, it's the same thing. It's the same topics. Let me just post this on my website. And now if anyone wants to see what it looks like when I have a discussion with one of these people, now you can see that. So now I don't have to waste my time on Twitter with people who simply believe in a religion that they don't believe they can question. I've gone in person we have this First Friday thing where a bunch of different people go down and sell different artwork and things, but there's also a lot of like different political movements and things that kind of organize and kind of set up shop down there and try to carry their message. And two of the groups that typically are down there are the Jehovah's Witnesses and the socialists. And it's funny to see them on opposite corners, both kind of preaching their doctrines as everyone just kind of walks past and completely ignores them, except for me, who is this discourse guy who's like, well, I'll actually engage in conversation. And, I think actually when I'm in person like that, I have more of an impact than I do on Twitter, because there's emotions and stuff involved. You can read facial expressions, and the discourse is just more more intricate, which I think enables me in a way to advance it further. But at the same time, at the end of the day, no one's getting converted here. No one's really stepping off their belief systems, as far as I know. I mean, maybe it happened later, who knows? But to me, these are just religions. These are zealots. These are people who believe in a doctrine, and they will repeat that doctrine till the day they're dead. And no matter what questions you ask that kind of point out, like, well, maybe this part doesn't make complete sense, these Jehovah Witnesses talking about how basically everyone's a sinner. It almost makes it sound like it doesn't even matter what you do as far as who you hurt or who you're kind to. None of that matters. It only matters whether you accept Jesus in your life. And to me, that's just such a cop-out as far as like being a good person. And, Jesus said to love thy neighbor. And to me, they're completely and utterly disregarding and ignoring that message. So, because to me, love consists of holding space and empathy and listening to other people as they express their feelings and their ideas, and treating them essentially like human beings, and not coming at them with some prejudice, a preconceived notion that this is some kind of evil or bad person that can't be listened to. And I got very much this. I get very much the same from the socialists who feel that way about, I guess, capitalists, or, people who believe that people should be free to work for a living and support themselves. There was a recent tweet, some socialist male feminist identified as, someone asked him, like, what would you do if you could just do anything with no consequences? He's like, well, I would rape some woman. And to me, like, this was kind of like revealing socialism for what it is, because, making love or having sex with someone is kind of a form of labor, right? I mean, you're doing physical work, you're doing emotional. If you're a good lover, you're doing emotional work, you're holding space, you're devoting your time, you're giving of yourself to your lover. And in a capitalist world, well, you would say, if that's something you really need and you don't have an opportunity to do it, well, you could just hire someone and you could pay them to do that labor for you. You could hire a sex worker, right? But in a socialist world, oh no, you can't hire anyone. You can't actually compensate anyone from their labor, yet you're still entitled to their labor. So I guess that's why this guy felt like that's what he wanted to do. He wanted sex, and he felt like that would be a reasonable way to accomplish it if the law allowed him to, and if moral norms allowed him to. See, for him, there was no internal morality. There was no internal conscience saying, hey, this is an act of violence against another person. This is an act of hatred and cruelty against another person. To him, it was just like, no, I'm entitled to do that because that's what I want, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter that I'm essentially enslaving and forcing another person to perform labor they don't want to perform. And so that that is what socialism is. And it's gonna, if you've got new arguments that aren't in that discussion, feel free to leave a comment on this video and I'll consider them. But, if all you've got to leave are personal insults, I'll probably just ignore them, for they are unworthy of consideration, So, yeah, any people who just come at you with insults. So I'm blocking a lot of people, and I think that's been a healthy thing for me. I can't even remember why I started talking about all this. Yeah, I should have some kind of outline when I do these videos, but that's kind of, I said I was talk about the law of attraction, so that's this other big issue I have, this idea that basically people are like they're like they have this idea that like every circumstance that exists in your life is entirely your own responsibility. And to me, that is very much victim blaming. It is very much uh it's it's a it's a statement of privilege. Usually people who are saying this are people who feel like they've got a good life and it's entirely to their own credit that they have this good life. And to me, that's just ridiculous. I knew a girl in my master's program. She was a top student, a bright young adult, and had a bright future in front of her. And you know what? She developed Ewing sarcoma, man. She got bone cancer. And she ended up passing away. And to me, that was no fault of her own. That was nothing she manifested. That was just bad fucking luck, man. And bad luck happens. Random drunk driver comes and sideswipes you or whatever the fuck. Um, and good luck can happen too. Person can win the lottery or win a big poker tournament that maybe they had an edge in, but there were thousands and thousands of people and they still got lucky as shit to win it. And this was like a life altering thing for them. Or maybe they ran into the right mentor at the right time who taught them the right thing they needed to know. But it was still good fortune. And maybe it was, some people believe in a higher power, divine intervention. I'm one of those people, and I think there are times that things are blessings that happen out of acts of kindness from powers greater than ourselves, but that's still nothing I can take credit for. So, it's not to say that everything that happens is just bad luck and that our decisions have no impact on our outcomes. I think you know there's stuff we can control and there's stuff we can't control, and we can set ourselves up for success as best as we can, and I think we should. But at some point there is a luck factor, and there is stuff to be grateful for, and there is bad luck, and there are unfortunate circumstances. Whenever these law of attraction people make this claim that like your reality is your own creation, I say, well, what about an abused child, right? I mean, you're born into an abusive household and you're getting beaten. What fault of the child is this? They had no say, no conscious say in where they would be born. I mean, it's just bad luck, man. And it's victim blaming, I think, to try to say that. So this was like a big thing for me. So that was another discussion I had on my website. And some of these are probably people I block now too, when they insist that, because again, they always end up, it becomes personal insults, and um it's like I'm not willing to have discourse with someone who's not having discourse, who's really just dead set on this dogma that they believe in, and you don't believe in it, they're going to attack you on every level that they can. So I'm not looking for that. I still believe that there's power in human connection. Um, I still think there's a lot that can be accomplished through an honest discourse and through holding space and empathy and compassion. Because really, to have empathy is to have compassion. I mean, people want to be heard. They want their ideas, their experiences, their feelings to be expressed. And when you shut that down, and this is something I've experienced a lot in my personal life, is people, you question them on any level, and all of a sudden they don't want to be friends anymore. You express something they didn't want to hear. You know, all of a sudden you're the pariah. You're someone they don't want to be associated with. And I've experienced this repeatedly with a lot of people. A lot of people have kind of shown me who they are, and who they are is someone pretty ugly. You know, I'm a good guy. I'm not out here threatening people with violence. Yet I have been threatened with violence. Um, 5 years ago, I had this big thing where I felt like I had fallen in love with this person, and um, well, they threatened me with government violence. They were that adamant about not hearing what I had to say that they actually felt like they needed to have a government order, an injunction, so that I couldn't communicate with them, even though I had never expressed any kind of physical threat to this person. They were that insecure about defend and that incapable of defending their own values, but it's something they believed with a dogmatic uh, belief, and for me to question that, I became the evil, bad person who needs to be threatened and discarded and dehumanized, and um, that was one experience of this, but there's been other experiences. I mean, uh, there was a woman who I was vaguely associated with, who her and her boyfriend had announced to me that they were breaking up. And I had always felt like this woman had expressed a keen amount of interest in me, and I guess I made a move, and I never did so while they were together, despite the attraction I had. I tried to be respectful. I tried to do the right thing. I tried to be a kind person. And I assumed if they were breaking up, well, they probably weren't that serious about each other, and it probably wouldn't be that big a deal. And I asked dude if I could do this, and he didn't respond for like 3 days. So I figured I had the wrong number. And I went ahead and reached out to her. And you know what I was told? I was told I was mentally ill for even thinking she might be interested. Again, dehumanized, cast as someone who no one could possibly ever be attracted to or ever have any interest in. And I was told I was no longer welcome in this social group based on that. So it just gives you an idea of the kind of absolute pieces of shit that are walking around in this society. And a lot of these people pretend they're fucking compassionate. They pretend they're good people. And it's like, I mean, this guy, it's like, when I gave him a copy of my book, I never even heard a fucking single word of response. I mean, I thought this was a guy who was actually interested in solving the problems in this world, but seems like he's more interested in just blaming other people um, and dehumanizing them and just being a pretty much all around piece of shit. So, uh, that was another experience I had. Um, I've had other people leave. I haven't totally understood the reasons. I had this friend, Melissa, who just one day decided she just didn't want to hear anything from me anymore. And this wasn't someone I was interested in on like any kind of romantic level, but it's someone, my kids really liked, and um, who I thought we were friendly, um, and I don't know what that situation, with that one is tougher to say that she was the bad person, because I just don't understand what it was all about. And um, I mean, my best guess is that I think she might have been interested in me and was kind of sad that I wasn't reciprocating that, even though she had told me early on that she wasn't looking for that or interested in that. So even if I had been attracted to her, I wouldn't have really brought that up as a thing. I mean, I might have tried to like distance myself, because it's not especially comfortable to be around someone you're super attracted to when you can't be with them. But I don't know, man. I've experienced a lot of pain. I've experienced a lot of suffering, and I've shed a lot of tears, man. But I'm still standing, man. And fuck, bro. I've been locked up in the fucking brig. I've been locked up in the mental hospital. I've been uh fucking experienced alcoholic fucking hell. You know, I've experienced a lot of shitty shit, man. But I guess, you know, that's why I believe in God. That's why I believe in divine intervention, you know, because I should have killed myself a lot of fucking times based on how I felt and the lack of hope I've had. But I've been given the reasons not to, you know. I've got 2 kids and I just haven't been willing to leave them in this cruel fucking world on their own, man. Uh, I wish I have sadness. When I think about this idea of like a romantic connection, obviously this is something I haven't really experienced for a long time. It's something I haven't really sought for a long time. In any serious, I mean, there's been a few times like that one time where I did express interest, but I haven't had any reciprocal interest, and frankly, these days there's a lot of people who hate me and who dehumanize me because you know, I'm not part of their group, I'm not a Trumper, I'm not a leftist, and I'm not I'm also not like in a position to like take care of someone um on a financial level. I mean, I'm taking care of myself, my kids, and it's been a lot. And I haven't worked since October 15th. I've I took a step out of the workforce. I've been surviving off of savings and trying to make a little bit of income, but I haven't come up with much. And I'm actually at this. I wasn't sure when I left. I always feel like we're on the brink of this dollar collapse, and every day it feels like it's even more imminent. But the timing is still unclear. And at this point, I got a certain amount of gold and silver and platinum and other assets, but I'm not willing to sell those things to sustain like a lifestyle. So I think the best move for me at this time is returning to the accounting world, and that's what I'm intending to do. So, I think the last firm I was at wasn't the best fit for me. I think at that time it served a purpose for me, but I was kind of, it just, it wasn't my kind of, it wasn't going to be a lasting career. It always kind of felt like a temporary landing place. While I went through a lot of this pain, and while I um, kind of, I wrote my book on the side, like, and it just wasn't something that was going to last, and it wasn't the best fit. It wasn't somewhere I wanted to stay forever. But that said, I think there are, you know, I'm a I'm a good accountant, and I think I can get along with people for the most part, and I think there's other opportunities. And you know I I have a lunch on Thursday with a firm that's thinking about bringing me on. So that's kind of exciting news for me, because I feel like I've been stagnant. I think this has been a good time for me. I think it's given me a chance to reflect and to pursue some other things, but at this point, I think I'm ready to go back into that world. And I don't know how long we're going to have a tax code, but for as long as we do, I can help people try to minimize their taxes. And, there's always going to be a need for accountants. As long as there are businesses, there's going to be businesses that need accountants. So we might have to sort of adapt and evolve as the situation changes. And my hope and my belief is that eventually the tax code will become null and void and will be thrown out by the government, that they will decide to take a more intelligent course and essentially follow a plan to end their operations and to allow freedom to exist, and real capitalism to exist, and for an economy to grow in the ruins of what will be the largest economic collapse in history, with the collapse of this credit bubble and this currency. So I don't expect that the tax code will be around forever, but I think when it goes, well, see, I think my assets, my gold, my silver, I think it's actually going to do a lot better than like even most of the gold and silver bugs believe, because I really think these things are going to become monetized, and they're not just it's not just that they're going to be used for transactions, they're going to be used for savings, and they're going to become the safe harbor. They're going to be what people save and attempt to accumulate. And so it's basically everyone's going to be fighting over the gold. And I think the people who are intelligent enough to get in front of that train and to own it prior to the collapse are going to do really well. And I think deservingly so. Uh, you know, the, there's the cryptos. I mean, I don't engage in a lot of discourse about the cryptos. I have my thoughts about them, but it's an area where I try to remain. I think there's some people who are pretty dogmatic about it, but I think there's people who are dogmatic about gold as well. I think there's people who are dogmatic libertarians who, I talked about how I advanced some of my ideas talking to these Marxists. I don't feel like that's something many other people, if any other people, have done within the libertarian movement. It's, I think a lot of these human tendencies are pretty widespread. I think that men and women tend to have I think women tend to have more empathy um in general. However, I think even though women have the willingness to listen and hold space, they don't necessarily have the willingness to acknowledge that they've listened, and to acknowledge that they have seen merit in what they've been hearing, because I think they're very threatened by the people around them, and the fact that, this whole, we talk about this woke cult. It's very insular, and it's very, if you start questioning it, they're going to kick you out, and they're going to dehumanize you, and they're going to bully you, and you're going to become like me. uh, but I think it's, human discourse needs to be authentic, and I would rather be authentic and be hated for who I am than to put on a fucking face and to play pretend just for the sake of social approval. Because at the end of the day, reality's reality. Economically, things are going to collapse, and when they do, uh, the people who have been closed-minded and haven't understood what's happening aren't going to be in much of a position to help or do much of anything good for anyone. So I would rather try to establish real connections with people who are empathetic and who have the courage to uh, to express themselves authentically, even if those opportunities are not that common. And I think I have developed some relationships along those lines that, you know, I mean, there's one woman, she's like my best friend now. Like I'm always sending her messages and we just talk about all this stuff. And, unfortunately she is taken, and, yet just knowing that she exists, it shows me how much more is available than that person 5 years ago who I thought I was in love with, but who really turned out to just not be the person I thought they were, who turned out to be someone who really seems to me to be pretty cruel and pretty willing to sacrifice other people for her own selfish objectives. Um, Maybe I'm misguided. Maybe I don't know the whole story. Maybe she's been physically threatened. There's a lot I don't know, but it seems, at least what I do know, it just seems like I can do better. If that better exists, I guess is what I would say. And so I haven't given up hope that that might be something that someday materializes for me. But again, it's not my biggest focus. My focus right now is preparing for the collapse, taking care of my kids, and getting my career back on track. So, with that, I don't think I've said anything that will cause me to delete this video, because that happens all the fucking time. I'll listen to the whole thing again. I'll be one thing. I'll be like, oh God, got to throw that one out. So hopefully I didn't do that. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this video, and you guys have a good evening.